quality education ensure predictable outcomes of all dentists of all disciplines and abilities. Our organization is established based on the fact that the dentistry is complex and requires ongoing learning experience. So we conduct various webinars and workshops to enhance the skills of dental professionals and guide their dental journey. So without further ado, let us start our series episode in which our topic of discussion is Crack the Code, Navigating Solutions for Cracked Teeth, given by Dr. Urvashi ma'am. To speak a few words about ma'am, Dr. Urvashi Tanwar completed her BDS from SDM Dental College and completed her master's in conservative dentistry and endodontics from Dayananda Sagar Dental College, Karnataka. She has won various awards in national and international conferences and have done many publications in dental magazines. With a commitment to conservative dentistry, Dr. Urvashi ma'am specializes in preserving natural teeth through advanced techniques and state-of-the-art endodontic procedures. So without wasting more time, I would like to invite Dr. Urvashi ma'am for today's discussion. Ma'am, please.
Thank you so much for the lovely introduction. I just want to ask if my screen is visible and if I am visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. So I'll just share my screen and let me know if you all can see my screen as well. Is it visible?
Yes,
Can
ma'am.
you see this
Yes,
screen?
ma'am. If anything is there, I will let you know.
All right. A very good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining me this Monday evening, especially after clinic hours, to learn a little bit about cracked teeth. We all know that teeth with cracks are a common occurrence in adults, with prevalence rate going up to 70% depending on the type of tooth and the location of the tooth. And the diagnosis and the treatment of cracked teeth are a significant challenge for us practitioners, and the outcome can be consequential, ranging from the need for a major restoration or root canal therapy, and sometimes even extraction. So, as a result, finding the best treatment option for cracked teeth is a major priority at this point. As doctor has already mentioned, I finished my undergrad from SDM Dental College, Dharwad, and then went on to pursue my master's from Dayanand Sagar Dental College, Bengaluru. After which I worked for a couple of years in Kamakshi Dental Clinic, Bengaluru, and I have shifted recently to Delhi, and I'm now working in Modern Dental Care, which is in Delhi. So it's just been a few months, but just wanted to share my experience, little experience in private practice and what I have encountered on cracked teeth. So today we'll be discussing cracked teeth under the following headings. That is the definition, the classification, the etiology of cracked teeth, pathology and consequences, diagnosis, which is very important because since they're a significant challenge for practitioners because of the diagnosis part, and often they lead to loss of the affected tooth, so this becomes very important. So we'll look a little bit into the diagnosis part of it, and then we'll finally look at therapeutic strategies on how to manage such cases. So, coming to the definition, the first time a cracked tooth or the symptoms were reported of a cracked tooth was way back in 1954 by Dr. Gibbs, where the symptoms of incomplete fracture of a posterior tooth involving cusps was detailed and given by Dr. Gibbs, and he called it cuspal fracture odontalgia. After which, in 1964, Cameron proposed cracked tooth syndrome, commonly we all know cracked tooth syndrome today, CTS. And he defined it as a critical posterior tooth with an incomplete fracture that includes the dentine extending into the pulp. This definition was then later modified by Ellis as a fracture plane of unknown depth and direction passing through the tooth structure, if not already involved, may progress to communicate with the pulp and or periodontal ligament. So as you can see, since 1954, This condition has been continuously redefined, renamed by various authors in different journals, articles. However, there has been no common definition and no common terminology, with the result that there is now so much confusion amongst the practitioners surrounding this cracked tooth or cracked teeth. So, American Association of Endodontists, AAE, came up with a definition, and they now define amelodentinal coronal fractures as incomplete fractures without visible separation or mobility of the fragments. This line is very important, that there is no mobility of the fragment, that it's not a split tooth. It is an incomplete fracture that initiate at the coronal level and then extend apically, and this is most often in the mesiodistal direction. This cracked tooth, the AAE definition of a cracked tooth, differs from complete longitudinal dentinal fractures where the two fragments are mobile and separable. This condition of a cracked tooth is often seen maximum in the mandibular molars, followed by maxillary premolars. But cracked tooth syndrome, what is it? The use of the term syndrome is particularly misleading in this situation, because a syndrome is defined as a number of symptoms occurring together and characterizing a specific disease. But in this situation, clearly a crack in a tooth is not a disease, and therefore this term, the syndrome, is inappropriate. So, for example, the so-called cracked tooth syndrome is often confused with vertical root fractures, but that's not the case. A cracked tooth syndrome means just a cracked tooth, which is an incomplete fracture with no mobile fragments. The management of cracks in teeth should actually be based upon the concept of a crack being a biological problem rather than a mechanical problem, and I'll explain this in detail in the further slides a little bit. But the simplest way to consider a crack in a tooth is that it has a potential to cause pulpal or periradicular diseases in the same manner that caries and breakdown of restoration margins can cause these diseases by allowing bacteria to enter the tooth and produce endotoxins that can reach the pulp, or ultimately the bacteria themselves can reach the pulp. So basically, this crack is actually acting as a pathway for the endotoxins or the bacteria to go all the way till the pulp and causing pulpal diseases or periradicular diseases. And that is why the crack should be thought as the cause of disease, especially pulpal disease, rather than being considered as a syndrome or a disease in itself. The noting or the presence of a crack should hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Am I audible? Sorry, I got cut out. 1 second, I'll just share my screen.
Okay.
Is this visible?
The camera is visible, but not the screen.
You cannot see my screen?
No, no, ma'am.
Okay. What about now? Are you able to see? Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Is the screen visible?
The screen is visible now.
Is it good? What are you able to see on the screen?
The AE classification, ma'am.
Okay, all right. So I was last talking about how the cracked tooth syndrome is in itself a misnomer because it is not a disease in itself, but is in fact it is capable of causing a disease. So henceforth, it'll be better if we avoid using the term syndrome for cracked teeth and just call it a cracked tooth in itself. Coming to the classification, the AAE also classified a cracked tooth into 5 different types depending on the severity, starting from the least severe to the most severe. So the 5 most common categories that we have, the first is the craze line, where you have visible fracture lines within the enamel, which is suggestive of craze lines. These are usually asymptomatic, do not require any treatment. However, if you wish to monitor these, you can definitely do so. The thing with cracks is, in my little experience, is that it is always better to inform the patient that this tooth is cracked, or this is what I feel we should do, or this is what we are going to monitor the tooth in such and such way. You should come for a regular follow-up, because a cracked tooth can always progress to something more severe and into the next category, as we'll discuss. The second category is that of a fractured cusp. In this, the patient might have mild pain, mostly during biting or in a cold, while having cold liquid or something like that, where there's a fractured cusp. It usually has a better prognosis than a cracked tooth, where if you look at the third image, where there's a cracked tooth involving the coronal structure and extending a bit into the root as well. So it usually, the fractured cusp has a better prognosis than a cracked tooth, where in cracked tooth you have severe pain during biting, and that also depends on the extent and the depth of the fracture that is going. The next is the split tooth, where this fracture continues longitudinally and it has completely split the tooth into 2 parts. This is also a very painful situation where the patient will come to you with pain during chewing, and this usually warrants an extraction because there's not much that you can do. And the last category is that of vertical root fractures. These are also a tough thing to diagnose because this is something that we cannot see, difficult to see slightly on x-rays as well. CBCT is also of not much help, but depending on the extent of the fractures, we can come to a diagnosis as well. So just to talk about today's lecture, we will be concentrating only on the cracked tooth, which is treatable. So please keep in mind that today I'll only be dealing about a cracked tooth and not a fractured cusp or a split tooth or a vertical root fracture, because those are detailed topics in itself. So I'll be talking only about the cracked tooth. Coming to the etiology. If you have to look at it, the predisposing factors for a cracked tooth are only 2. One is that there is increase in the forces that are acting on the tooth, and the second are those that weaken the resistance of the tooth to the chewing force. So these are the only 2 scenarios where you can have a condition that can lead up to a cracked tooth. So let's discuss it all in detail. You have 2 broad categories. One is non-iatrogenic factors, and you have odontoiatrogenic factors. In the non-iatrogenic factors, you have aging, oral habit, and the inherent dental structure in itself. Coming to aging, above 40 years of age, you see a more prevalence of cracked tooth. And this is because as the age increases, the degree of fatigue of the tooth increases, hard tissues become fragile, and the elasticity of the dentine is also lost. So when the force is imposed on the tooth, and this exceeds the limit of dentine elasticity, the teeth are gonna crack. So weakened dental hard tissue, lost dentinal elasticity, the tooth is gonna crack. The normal bite force in humans ranges from 3 to 30 kgs. So that is why when you have teeth that are subjected to forces beyond this range, especially when you're chewing hard objects like betel nut or any form of nut, or hard opening bottles and all that stuff. So if you exceed this range, then the probability of the tooth structure getting damaged definitely increases, okay? If you have any oral habits where you have thermal cycling eating habits, long-term unilateral chewing, especially when people do not replace missing teeth of one side, they are chewing on the other side for a very, very long time. So this puts undue pressure and forces on the remaining teeth. So they are at a higher chance of getting cracked than normal teeth, where the force is equally distributed. Also, restorative procedures can reduce the structural strength of the tooth as well as increase the risk of cracked teeth by almost 29 times, which is a pretty high number. Uh, Coming to dental structures where you have something like precocious occlusion or a structural defect in the tooth itself, like sometimes you have local areas of the tooth which appears structurally weak due to incomplete fusion of the calcified areas during the developmental stages. So these local areas can also lead to a cracked tooth in the future because they are foci of hypomineralization. So they are naturally weak. The tooth is inherently weak. So even if you put normal forces on it, it is bound to crack more often than the natural tooth, which is fully formed. Also, if you have deep occlusal and large vertical radicular grooves or bifurcations, and even sometimes extensive pulp spaces, because these are in fact spaces only, there is loss of hard tissue in that area. So, the bigger the chamber, the bigger the pulp space, then you have lesser hard tissue space remaining, right? So, all these tooth structures, they can lead up to causing more cracked teeth in the same tooth. The tooth anatomy can partly explain the risk indicators for cracked tooth, especially the tip tilt. You have the cusp tip we are talking about, the tilt being one of the key parameters. So studies have actually shown that the horizontal component of the bite that exerts force at the bottom of the fovea, that means the cervical neck, the neck of the tooth. So if you change the parameters, the horizontal component, if it's tilted slightly more, it is going to put more force on the neck of the tooth. So this is going to increase the tensile stresses in that area, and then it will increase the risk of cracks in such area. So the more the cuspal inclination, the more high grooves you have, and more tilt of the tip, the cuspal tip, the more the tooth is prone to fractures. So steep inclinations and cuspal inclination, all these things also predispose a tooth to getting cracked faster than normal teeth. Coming to odontoiatrogenic factors, you have head and neck radiotherapy, root canal therapy, restorative procedures, material performance, and stress function. Coming to head and neck radiotherapy, this impacts the tooth structure in multiple ways. On one hand, it directly affects the tooth structure where it changes the protein composition that forms the cleavage plane of the tooth, as well as affecting the production of porous enamel at the cervix, at the dental cervix. So it is changing the protein composition of teeth, the radiotherapy. Also, you have synergistic effects of other clustering of oral symptoms, like you have a decrease in the salivary flow. This will cause the tooth enamel to become brittle in a very dry environment. So the fracture toughness will decrease. The organic matter in the DJ will get reduced due to the dehydration. And because of this, the anchorage between the dentine and the enamel will slowly come down. When that comes down, then the tooth is automatically at risk of more more prone to getting cracked in the future, because we'll understand how cracks are formed in the coming slides. We'll understand how crack is formed. So you will know that enamel, DJ, and dentine play a major pivotal role in avoiding cracks and how to deflect the cracks naturally. So once you lose this inherent nature, the nature of the tooth itself to deflect cracks because of the radiation therapy, then automatically the tooth is predisposed to getting cracked. So the altered characteristics of the DJ would also change the distribution of the mechanical stresses that increase the probability of having more enamel craze lines and cracks. In addition to all the salivary alterations that you have, the daily diet also of the patients undergoing head and neck therapy then tends to lead to have a low oral pH. So that results in more tooth demineralization, making the tooth more weak and more at risk to cracks. Coming to root canal therapy, endodontic treatment, as we all know, decreases the fracture resistance of a tooth by 5%. Also, if you have a devitalized tooth, it suffers from a loss of proprioception, as we all know, and this increases the mechanical stress in the tooth. Also, the contact between the instrument and the canal wall, the more that you're using an instrument at high speed in a dry environment, even for a short period of time, can have a harmful effect on the dentine, and the probability of causing cracks is higher in such cases. Also, there's a significant correlation between the formation of cracks and the amount of dentine removed. So that is why excessive widening of the root canal can also put the tooth, especially the root, at risk of fracture. So we endodontists have to keep in mind while performing root canal that we make sure that we are not using the rotary files in a dry environment, and second, that we are not enlarging the canals too much, not too much of taper, because the more taper we have, the more tooth structure we're removing from the neck of the tooth, which is the most important part of the tooth. That is the biorim. We are removing so much tooth structure from there. So we need to keep that in mind if we want to avoid this tooth getting cracked in the future. Also, you have many restorative procedures such as placement of friction locks or self-threaded pins or posts, which are like threaded metal posts and all. This puts a lot of stress on the residual tooth structure and eventually results in cracks. So large amalgam restorations, especially of mandibular molars, I'll show you cases. I have like all the amalgam restorations that I have seen are all cracked, and there is so much of decay under that because of the cracks, because these cracks have actually acted as pathway of entry of bacteria, of all the endotoxins, and they have caused so much of secondary caries. And mind you, none of it appears on any of the IOPs. So try to replace all silver amalgam fillings as much as possible. At least all that I'm seeing, they're all cracked and they all have secondary caries underneath it. Okay. Coming to material performance, you have the wedge effect that is caused by the occlusal relationship between the cusp and the fossa during chewing. And this actually induces cyclic fatigue. And the metallic materials that we use, they have a difference in the thermal expansion. The coefficient of thermal expansion is different for composites, for materials like amalgam, the metals. Because of this, whenever there is a change in temperature, they are going to expand differently. The tooth, the composite, the amalgam, they are all going to expand and contract differently. So when they come back to their original position, they end up stressing the tooth a lot. In such situations, if the tooth is already weak, it can end up getting cracked. So that is why it's very important to choose materials which have similar material properties like that of the tooth itself. That is why we always suggest that we use composites as a dentine replacement and ceramics as an enamel replacement. Why? Because they have similar material properties. We do not want too much of a difference, especially in coefficient of thermal expansion between the two materials, because if they expand and contract, it's going to cause a lot of stress on the tooth, which is something that we want to avoid. Okay. So these are some of the, you could say, predisposing factors, the etiology, something. All these factors could lead to having a cracked tooth. So this is what we need to know already. If we find any of these factors when we are looking inside the patient's mouth, we need to look at everything as a whole. Okay, the patient is undergoing radiotherapy, so they might have less salivary flow, so they might have a dry tooth, or so many things. So just keep a lookout for all these factors and then evaluate the patient's mouth. Okay, so coming to crack pathology. The tooth is actually a very stiff organ that resists the spread of cracks throughout life fairly well. That God has already made the tooth in such a way that it is going to avoid cracks because it already has the mechanisms to deflect such cracks, and we'll see how. Then, nevertheless, we have to understand that the tenacity of the tooth as a structure in order to direct the therapeutic management of cracked teeth. So we need to understand this, that how the tooth is deflecting cracks, because if we are taking away from the tooth, then we have to replace that as well, in a biomimetic way, right? So that if we know how the DJ is acting in deflecting cracks, then the same way we should also replace it in a way so that in the future it should be able to deflect cracks in a similar manner. Now, I think this picture you all are going to remember. It is a section of the enamel. This, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but this is the enamel, and this is the dentine. And if you can see that you have enamel tufts that are rising from the DEJ, the dentino-enamel junction, you have small enamel tufts that are coming out, and you have enamel lamella that are coming all the way from the enamel, and they are getting inserted into the dentine. Now, why am I talking about this? Okay. Chai et al. Described areas of enamel called tufts. Now, these are located at the DJ, and they actually improve the mechanical properties of the enamel by allowing it to bear stresses. Can you imagine? Enamel tufts are small ultrastructures that are present at the level of the DJ that are extending from the dentine into the enamel. they are helping prevent cracks and allowing it to bear stresses. But paradoxically, also, these tufts are actually weak areas because they are small defects of the microstructure that actually serve as starting point for the development of cracks, because they are actually a small defects. So it can be a starting point for the development of cracks. They are hypomineralized areas, but they have high protein concentrations as well, and they're located at the level of the DEJ. Okay, so natural enamel cracks extend from the DEJ to the occlusal surface, but some of them are stopped along the path because of the enamel. Okay, now we'll understand how enamel acts as a crack stopper. How does it increase the resistance to crack growth in enamel? Okay, this happens through three ways basically. One is the deviation that takes place in the transition region from the internal to the external enamel. Okay, to tell it in a very simple form, think of it as internal enamel and external enamel, and you have a crack that is coming down. Okay, so in the external enamel, the prisms are actually relatively straight. The enamel prisms are straight, and the cracks extend along these prisms. But as soon as they come to the internal enamel, the cracks meet oblique prisms. Okay, the enamel prisms in the internal enamel are actually oblique in nature. So when the crack is coming in a straight direction, once it meets the internal enamel, it gets deviated. So the moment it meets an oblique prism, it gets deviated. So this is how enamel helps in causing crack deviation, because we do not want the crack to go all the way down into the pulp. Okay, this is the first thing, the deviation that happens from the external enamel to the internal enamel. Okay, second, micro cracking. Now what happens is that there is a at the front of the growing crack, the crack as it's traveling downstairs, like as it's going down, the micro cracking occurs in front of the growing crack, and it slows down the main crack by reducing the intensity of the local stress by dividing the crack. Basically, the crack gets divided into many micro cracks. So it does not have the same intensity of travel as the original big crack. Okay. So this is the second thing. This is called micro cracking. Okay. The third thing is crack bridging, which prevents the propagation of cracks in internal enamel. How? These bridges are actually induced by the organic matrix of the enamel itself. So within the internal enamel, it actually promotes the closure of cracks. Thanks to the maintenance of the protein frame and everything, it is actually causing closure of these cracks by crack bridging, and they stop the crack growth completely. And all these three mechanisms seem to exist only in the internal enamel, particularly in the zone of decussation, and contribute to making the enamel an extremely tenacious tissue against the propagation of cracks. So cracks that only affect the enamel are actually, the moment they come down to the DEJ, they are stopped. And from the crack from the enamel to the DEJ, they are called Kray's lines. That is why I told that these are completely asymptomatic. Kray's lines in the enamel need no treatment, although you can monitor them, but they're asymptomatic completely. And very rarely they progress to all the way to the crossing the DEJ and crossing dentine, causing no pain. And they're almost always like discovered as a fortunate this thing. Unfortunately, like you're doing a normal clinical routine examination and you'll discover these crack lines. Oh, these are enamel Kray's lines, and they usually do not require any treatment. So this was enamel resisting cracks. Okay, three big reasons: deviation from the external to the internal enamel, micro cracking, and crack bridging. All these three happen mostly in the internal enamel. Now let's come down to the DEJ. It has actually been found that crack arrest mechanism only appears if the crack approaches the DEJ on the enamel side. It has to come from the enamel to the DEJ, then only the DEJ will start its crack resistance formula. So what the DEJ has is that it has a lower mineralization, but it has a higher collagen content, because of which it prevents stress concentration. Second reason, the scalloped and the micro-scalloped DEJ design allows a very good cohesion between the enamel and the dentine, and this forms a complex area which is capable of plastic deformation. So however the crack comes, it helps it deflect. The DEJ basically helps it deflect it in a different direction. This is what I was talking about, which becomes missing in radiation therapy. When you lose the cohesion between enamel and dentine, this mechanism of resisting cracks is lost. So that is why they are at more risk of getting cracked teeth. And the third thing is the crack arrest, which is explained by differential modulus of elasticity between the enamel and dentine. Okay, so the more the difference, because of the difference of basically stiffness of the material, the crack gets deflected, or the DJ gets more resistant to such cracks because of the change in the modulus of elasticity. Now, as we all know, the enamel acts as a compression dome. Okay, the compression loads, whatever the enamel gets, the loads are transferred via the DJ to the dentine. And in this transfer, a stress concentration occurs actually at the DJ, because it converts the vertical load of the enamel into a horizontal load in the dentine. This is the function of the DJ. Okay, so plays a major role. DJ plays a major role in a lot of functions, especially in the force conversion, in resisting cracks. So very important structure that we cannot lose. Okay, coming to the dentine, the resistance to cracking decreases from the DJ to the pulp because of the increase of the dentinal tubules, and we have less hydroxyapatite crystals as well. This actually allows for easier crack propagation. So once the crack has actually crossed the DJ, reached the dentine, it is going to go lower, and it might cause some symptoms to the pulp and the periradicular regions. The mantle dentine, which is the dentine just below the DJ, actually participates in stopping cracks because of its tonicity, because it's so tough and it's so stiff, and its mineral content is lower. Because it contains fewer dentinal tubules, it's able to resist the crack propagation much better than if the crack progresses deeper than the mantle dentine, where the tubules become bigger and more in number. Then the crack propagation is difficult to stop. But till mantle dentine also, the crack propagation is halted to some extent. Okay, now we are going to talk about consequences of a crack. What happens if this crack progresses? What are these cracks capable of? Okay, as I spoke before, there are two things that we need to consider. Okay, one is the biological aspect of it, one is the mechanical aspect of it. Okay, so the biological aspect is that cracks should be considered as a potential pathway for entry of bacteria into the tooth. This is very, very important. Just like caries or breakdown of respirative margins, they are going to allow all the bacteria and the endotoxins to come all the way inside the pulp. Similarly, we also need to realize that crack can do the same things, actually holds potential for the pathway of entry of bacteria into the tooth. But at the same time, I want to stress upon this, that it is important to note that not all cracks will lead to pulp and periradicular diseases. These problems will only occur if a sufficient number of bacteria are present in the crack, and if these particular bacteria are virulent enough to cause pulpal and periradicular symptoms. Okay. Further, you have many other factors like state of health of the pulp. At the current situation, if you look at the pulpal health, whether it's able to combat the bacterial invasion at that time, or whether the pulp can resist this invasion or not, or the irritation that is created by the endotoxin. So there are so many factors. I am not saying that every crack is going to lead into pulpal necrosis and you have to do endodontic treatment. No. So, but you have to understand that it can cause potential pulpal diseases in the future. Okay, so this is a consequence of having a crack in a tooth. Okay, the biological part of it, the pulpal symptoms, and the periradicular disease that it has the potential to cause. The second part of it is the mechanical part of it. A crack on the marginal ridge leads to a significant weakening and a loss of marginal ridge. One marginal ridge leads to a reduction of 46% of tooth strength. That's almost like 50%. Okay. And if you lose two marginal ridges, that's like up to 63%. You have lost so much strength of the tooth because of one crack in a marginal ridge. So that is a mechanical implication of having a crack. Okay. Lateral chewing forces, as well as cavity preparations, which create internal shear, tensile stresses that can lead to complete or incomplete fracture of a root. This can also happen. So these are all the mechanical aspects of having a crack. Okay. Next, let's come to the diagnosis. During the earlier stages of a cracked tooth, When the symptoms and signs are frequently blurred, it is very difficult for dentists to diagnose cracked teeth. Dentists must arrive at a clear diagnosis as much as possible, and currently there are multiple techniques that include the following that we are going to discuss now. But in the beginning, if you have vague symptoms coming from the patient where the patient is not exactly able to describe some sort of pain in some region, they're not even able to pinpoint which tooth it is, such things. So please be, please think of it that it could be a cracked tooth, but at the same time, don't think that every tooth is cracked or every tooth is giving symptoms of a cracked tooth. Okay. So mostly we'll discuss about three major things, that is the clinical examination, transillumination, and pulp sensitivity. Okay. Combination of percussion, point load, and cold stimulation tests to find the sick tooth, or use a special plastic bite block. And I think you all are well aware of tooth sleuth as a device where you place the concave area of this pyramid on the suspected cusp, ask the patient to bite down gently, and then observe the patient's reaction. Okay. So in the presence of a crack, the response to this test is usually an absence of pain when loading and severe pain when unloading. Okay. Although some research does suggest that you can have pain during loading also, but the typical reaction is pain due to unloading, when there is unloading, because usually that time you have movement of the fragments where the dentinal tubules send the reaction to the pulp that something has moved, which is when the patient gets pain. Okay. Another small tip I want to give you: if the pain stops quickly after bite relaxation, then a coronal crack can be suspected. Okay. But if the pain persists, or if it is present even without the overload, even without the function or without the bite, then you have to suspect a radicular fracture, because in those cases, the desmodontal inflammation can be suspected, because it has reached all the way till the root then, because it's still paining. So if the pain quickly stops after bite relaxation, it is a coronal crack. If the pain persists even after you remove the load, you have to think of a radicular fracture. Okay. The bite test actually sets the microfragments in motion on both the sides of the crack, which simulates the, as I told, the odontoblast via the fluid movements within the dentinal tubules. Okay. So pain during this test is actually a pathognomic sign of a cracked tooth. However, the absence of a reaction to this test does not exclude the possibility of a crack. It does not mean that you do not have a crack. You can still go ahead and do other tests to find out if you have a crack or not. Okay. All said and done, all the compression test, loading test, percussion test, some researchers actually believe that applying pressure to the tooth, which is already cracked, you're suspecting it to be cracked, and then you put it under a load, it can actually result in further propagation of the crack. So because of this associated risk of spreading the crack or propagating the crack even more, just because you want to test whether this tooth is cracked or not, is actually not recommended. Okay. So point, load, and bite tests actually are not recommended to be done in a tooth where you are suspecting a crack. Okay. So what do we do? Okay. So there's another thing where you have methylene blue dye staining. Okay. This helps in visual detection of coronal cracks because of the aggregation tendency of the dye. This dye tends to aggregate. It shows you exactly the line of the crack, but the use of this dye also may hide some cracks or lead to subtle color changes in the deeper layers of the enamel. Also, sometimes you might have to remove the original restoration because of the crack might be going deeper. It will be under the restoration. So you might have to remove the restoration and then perform this test, but it is a good test at the same time. Okay. The second is transillumination. So transillumination is a useful diagnostic test that can visualize centrally located mesiodistal cracks as a shadow. Basically, depending on the stage of discovery, at what point, the extent, the depth of a crack, these teeth actually may display normal to deep periodontal probing as well along the crack line. Okay. Depends on the extent of the crack. Doesn't mean that every crack will have some sort of periodontal changes, or you will have bone loss, or you will have attachment loss. We don't know. It can be in the beginning of a crack, you might not find such symptoms or such findings, but at the maybe later stages of crack propagation, you might find one isolated narrow pocket somewhere. Okay. So Transillumination basically consists of placing a light beam perpendicular to the supposed cracked plane. Okay, so if the tooth is actually deeply cracked, the light will be blocked and only part of the tooth will be eliminated. Okay, I'll show you in the picture. So if the tooth is actually micro cracked, the light continues to spread and illuminates the whole tooth. But if the tooth is fully cracked, it will not allow light to pass and only a particular plane of tooth will be illuminated and the rest of the tooth will be dark. So you have devices like DiagnoCam and KeriView. This is by Kerr Dental. So these devices are used for transillumination, and this will help in diagnosing the extent of a crack, the depth of a crack, and where the crack is actually located on a tooth. Okay. Coming to pulp sensitivity. Actually, hypersensitivity to cold is the most common symptom of dental cracking. And according to a study done by Hilton et al., 81% of the patients with a dental crack experienced pain in response to cold. Now, why I'm asking you to do this test is because we need to understand the status of the pulp, whether it's in reversible state or in irreversible state. And depending on what result you get, I'll tell you how to treat the patient in therapeutic strategies. I'll show you a flow chart, what to do when it's a reversible state and when there's an irreversible state of the pulp. Okay. So these three tests are basic tests that you can do: the clinical examination, the transillumination, and pulp sensitivity test. Okay. Other than this, obviously, dentists usually diagnose cracks by observing the peripheral crack lines. You can't treat what you can't see. So you need to see it, visualize it, see the crack surface, see the fractured surface. But observing these crack lines do not represent their size and shape. You can never tell how deep they are going, the extent of a crack, the depth, what all things it is causing in the deeper planes of a tissue you cannot predict. But however, you can visualize a crack definitely. So experienced clinicians have actually suggested that the magnification used to assess the range of enamel cracks is approximately 14 to 18 times, and 16 times is actually the optimal magnification that should be used for evaluating enamel cracks. Okay. If you look at this picture, these are all pre-operative cases that I have actually treated. Silver amalgam fillings, which I continue to insist patients to get them removed or replaced, because they always end up causing secondary caries, fractured cusp, cracks, and a multitude of problems. So especially if you see presence of an unbounded restoration, an amalgam or a failed composite, these actually have put a defect into the enamel's compression dome, which is why it is not able to function the way it is supposed to and ends up cracking the tooth. So it is actually a risk factor, because when the compression dome is broken, the distribution of stresses through the dentine does not occur because of the blocking effect of the cavity. This causes a concentration of stresses between the peripheral rim of enamel and the cavity wall. So very important to make a diagnosis by careful visual examination of the cavity floor. Look at the marginal ridges. You will see one or two marginal ridges are always cracked. Okay. So next time, keep a lookout for small cracks. Okay. Next thing is, you might ask me how important IOPA is or how important or CBCT is in the diagnosis, but it is impossible to visualize cracks on radiographic images. And I'm talking about cracks. I'm not talking about fractured cusps or split tooth or a vertical root fracture. No, these are cracks. These are very thin lines. They are incomplete fractures actually. And only fractures, which is the next stage of cracking, like after a cracked tooth, if it continues to progress, you will have a fracture, which is a bigger crack basically. So only fractures oriented in the radiographic axis will be detectable. If it is positioned in such a way, then only you'll be able to see it in aniopia. Otherwise, you won't be able to. Okay. And the most frequent radiographic feature of a fracture will actually be a halo around the root, which we all know, the J-shaped radiolucency, periapical and the periradicular radiolucency combined on one or both the sides of the root. But this only happens in the later stages. That is when you're removing the tooth. You at this stage where you have a cracked tooth which has progressed on to a fracture, a vertical root fracture, you get a J-shaped radiolucency. There's nothing much you can do. You have to extract the tooth. Okay. What I'm talking about is diagnosis of a cracked tooth before this stage, so that we are able to treat it. We are still able to save the tooth. Okay. So I'm talking about this situation. Now, coming to therapeutic strategies, as I told you, the consequences of cracks are two. One is biological, pulpal symptoms, and one is mechanical, where it ends up breaking the tooth. So, even our therapeutic strategies will be revolving around this only. What we have to do is limit the bacterial infiltration. Okay. Biologically, pulp dentine and periodontal biocompatibility is absolutely necessary. Pulp dentine biocompatibility actually aims at protecting the pulp complex and ensuring sealing using adhesive systems to avoid bacterial contamination, percolation, and pulp irritation. So basically, how are you going to avoid, once you've removed the crack or you've removed the crack to a certain extent, not completely, how are you going to seal it? You're going to do immediate dentinal sealing. This is happening because of the adhesive systems that we use, the bonding, all that stuff. Okay, so you open the crack, you clean the crack in the peripheral seal zone. What is the peripheral seal zone? Peripheral seal zone is 2 to 3 millimeters of all decay that you remove inside of the DJ. So you need all your periphery to be clean. In the PSZ, in this peripheral seal zone, you have to remove all the cracks. It has to be a crack-free zone. Anyway, you do not have any pulp under it, so you can remove it without any risk of pulp exposure. But this area needs to be completely clean, followed by immediate dentine sealing. This is how you will block the pathway of bacteria progress into the pulp. Okay, so as I said, in first thing is in involving the line of cracks to prevent further bacterial penetration. Okay, however, you need to know that it is practically impossible and also can be sometimes damaging to attempt to chase cracks extending into the pulp. You cannot go just, okay, I'll remove this entire crack today and then you end up inside the pulp. No, you have to understand that you can remove crack only to a certain depth, and you cannot go all the way in just by chasing cracks. However, the best way to chase a crack, if I had to say, would be an air abrasion. If you have an air abrasion system, use those to chase cracks because that's the safest way to chase a crack. But with the burr, you have to keep in mind that you need to remove all cracks in the peripheral seal zone. Okay, so crack opening, cleaning, mostly indicated peripheral aspect of the cavity, must be limited depending on the clinician's ability to restore it. Okay, you have to understand that whatever you're removing, you have to restore it as well. This sealing is ensured through immediate dentine sealing and eventually some small composite buildup you can do or some DME you can do. Okay, so what we are basically doing is that we are creating a hybrid layer. Okay, our IDS creates a hybrid layer. This inhibits the propagation of cracks due to its capacity for deformation and absorption of stresses, just like the DEJ. This is what we want. You know, we want to recreate the DEJ. DEJ had the main characteristic of deflecting cracks or being able to bear the stresses. Our hybrid layer is going to act like the DEJ. Okay, and even better if we use materials which assist in this, like if you have Everex posterior, you have small fibers in it, fiber reinforced composites, they are going to deflect cracks. So these are going to be materials that are going to help you in recreating the original resistance to crack characteristics that the tooth originally had. Okay, again, once you do the IDS, you have a composite resin which has a shock absorption effect by increasing the cusp stiffness and redistributing the occlusal loads away from the crack. Okay, so what you have to also do is that make sure that you change the anatomy in such a way that it no longer has cuspal inclines which are very steep, and modify the anatomy in such a way that the load on the tooth is slightly less. Okay, so basically, limiting bacterial infiltration is through optimal bonding of restoration, improves the strength of the ceramic as well, because on top of this IDS and composite, you are going to put some sort of ceramic material to replace the enamel. So it improves the strength of the ceramic as well and the prepared tissue, and it helps to stabilize the weakened cusps as well. Okay, this is how we are going to limit bacterial infiltration. Let's look at a case quickly. So this patient was actually referred to me by another doctor in my clinic, and they were doing the case and they noticed a crack in the tooth, and after which this is how there was a previous restoration, and I then they removed that restoration and then they passed on the case to me, and then I saw this huge crack. Okay, the patient just had sensitivity or some sort of mild discomfort, but nothing like night pain or I did a cold test. It did not give any symptoms of irreversible pulpitis. So here, as you can see, you have cracks in enamel, which we don't need to be worried about, but we have cracks in dentine as well, which we need to worry about a bit. Okay. And this big crack that you can see is a vertical crack. Okay. I'll explain the difference between a vertical and an oblique crack later on in the slides. Okay. So I did the crack dissection completely in the peripheral seal zone. And when I came more towards the pulp, I removed the crack till up to 5 millimeters from the cusp tip, because now we are closer to the pulp. Okay. Cleaned up the cavity a bit. Okay. This is all done under isolation, of course. I have placed Everex fibers in the crack zone. Okay. And I made sure that I try to replicate the DEJ as much as I can. Did the proximal wall buildup, decoupling with time. DWT stands decoupling with time, where we wait for 5 minutes for the hybrid layer to mature completely before there is a competition between the stresses, the concentration stresses from the shrinkage of composite towards the enamel or the dentine. So once you have a strong hybrid layer, the bonding is going to be much better. So decoupling with time is where you wait for 5 minutes after the image and dentine sealing and with a millimeter of flowable composite. After this, we did a cusp by cusp build up. Okay. And then this tooth was kept under observation, monitoring, because I realized that this tooth was the vertical crack was very deep. I did not know how deep it had gone into the pulp or could be causing symptoms as such. So I wanted to keep this tooth under a follow-up. And after a year and a half, this patient came back to me with irreversible symptoms of pulpitis, and after which we treated this tooth with endodontic treatment and a cap. So basically, my issue is that cracked teeth are going to progress slowly. All that we can do is diagnose them at the earliest so that we can push more invasive treatment options for later. Okay. The cracked tooth, we are not treating the crack as such. Okay. We're never able to completely treat the crack. Okay. We can only modify it a bit, deflect it a bit, make sure that we remove predisposing factors and such. But if the crack has gone to deeper levels, it is going to continue and it is going to cause further symptoms. So this patient actually went for endodontic treatment. So now again, we have increased the life of the tooth. We managed to get 1.5 years through a restoration. Then we did root canal treatment. And I don't know now how the crack is going to progress or what is going to happen. We don't know. Okay. So currently, root canal therapy worked. Okay. Next thing, we talked about the biological implications of it, limiting the bacterial ingress. Mechanical part, how will we take care is limit the crack propagation. So what we're going to do is immobilize the crack fragments that move during loading. How? By splinting or by covering the cusps. Splinting can be done by crack cusp grinding, and covering the cusp, you have to remove the cusp completely and cover them with ceramic. Okay. Now, what is this reduction in covering of cusp going to help? How is it going to help? Basically, it's going to reduce the flexion during loading, and therefore it is going to have fewer symptoms. The distribution of the occlusal load over the entire prepared tooth is going to be much, much, much better. So this is going to minimize stresses. It will also protect against crack propagation. There is reduction of fracture risk. There's protection of cusp from stresses towards the outside as well. And overall, it increases the fracture toughness of the tooth to the level of an intact tooth. This is talking about ceramic replacement of the cusps. Okay. Now let's look at another tooth. This patient came to me, no symptoms at all. This patient just wants to replace all their silver amalgam fillings as well. But if you look at it, this mesiolingual cusp is completely cracked. This is a 3-6 and a 3-7. And you can see the 3-6 mesiolingual cusp is completely cracked. You can see secondary caries under it. It has turned bluish gray. So I knew for a fact that we are going to lose this cusp. Okay. Just for a reference, I took a picture during the excavation to show to the patient. And this is what I found just underneath the silver amalgam restoration. Okay. Removed everything, knew the cusp was going to get lost. Proceeded to reform the cavity a bit. in imagedentinal sealing, put a layer of composite because my hybrid layer is much stronger with the composite. Did a bit of dentine replacement with the composite as well, restored the 7 with composite directly. Then I proceeded to design this restoration under CEREC. We used an Emax lithium disilicate block. This is how it looks after crystallization, and this is how the tooth looks after bonding. And this is the final look of the case. So this is how cracks can be managed. In fact, this was a crack that if we wouldn't have taken care of it, it would have probably fractured the complete mesolingual cusp off. Okay, so we got there in time. We removed it completely, and we managed to save the tooth one cusp at a time. Okay. Now, if you look at this flow chart, it gives you a very, it might look a bit elaborate, but it gives you a treatment flow chart of what to do when you have reversible pulpitis in a cracked tooth and what to do irreversible pulpitis in a cracked tooth, okay? So when you have reversible pulpitis, you're going to remove all the restoration and the cracks, okay? And where they have mentioned sedative lighting and temporary restoration and covering with the stainless steel band, I recommend doing immediate dentinal sealing, do a composite build-up, and do your dentine replacement, and then you can reassess. Like I had kept that tooth for reassessment. I had done a direct filling. I reassessed, but that tooth turned symptomatic, went into irreversible pulpitis, where we initiated endodontic therapy. So you do that immediate dentinal sealing in this portion. Okay, if the symptoms resolve, review for 3 months. And if all your pulp tests are normal, then you restore with an overlay or a crown or however you want to do it. But if the symptoms continue and you have irreversible pulpitis, then you go to the irreversible pulpitis flowchart. You have to start root canal treatment. Again, they've written a temporary restoration with a stainless steel band. I would say do a permanent restoration with a composite, reassessed again after 6 to 8 weeks. Again, if your symptoms continue, and even if in the reversible pulpitis you have even no resolution of symptoms after 3 to 6 months, maybe the root is involved, the fracture has continued, and you might have to extract the tooth. However, in irreversible pulpitis patients, if you reassess after 6 to 8 weeks of endodontic treatment and the symptoms resolve, then you can finish the whole restoration, do a full crown or whatever you want to do, but keep this tooth, a cracked tooth, under review always for 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, and then 3 years, okay? To put it simply, because that was so complicated, you can take a screenshot of this if you want, and I'll give you the journal, the article name is also written, mentioned on top. You can take a screenshot of this if you want to go read. The article is also really good, where managing cracked teeth with reversible pulpitis. But if you want it simple, where is the crack? It's in the enamel, it's a surface craze-like, don't worry about it. If it's internal in the dentine, you have oblique and you have vertical, okay? So now oblique cracks and vertical cracks, what are they? I'm going to tell you in a very simple way. So the clearer the fracture lines appear clinically, the more clearly you can see, oh, this is a proper fracture line, okay? The more vertical the cracks are. That crack is going extremely vertical, and the more likely they are due to compressive stresses, which tend to ovalize the whole tooth structure, including the roots, okay? On the other hand, if you see shallower fracture lines, which are sort of visible, not able to see, they'll be very white in nature. So they are shallow fracture lines. So that is an oblique crack, okay? And they are actually related to tensile stresses, which actually tend to deflect the cusps outside the occlusal perimeter of the tooth. So this is the difference between oblique and vertical cracks. Basically, cracks that you can see properly are vertical. Cracks that you can't see too well are oblique cracks, okay? If in oblique cracks, what does the rest of the tooth look like? If it's a good tooth, do a partial coverage. You can be more conservative, like I was in the previous. It was just a partial onlay of the affected cusp. If the rest of the tooth structure looks really bad, go for a full occlusal overlay. If you have vertical cracks, go for a full occlusal overlay. This is what they have recommended. So this is a very simple chart that you can follow in your head, okay? So in this picture, if you look at it, they have cracks. All the red cracks are vertical cracks because of the compressive stresses, and you have blue cracks, which are sort of oblique cracks, and they are because of the tensile stresses of the tooth, okay? We look at one more case, okay? Now look at the distal marginal ridge. This is a composite restoration somebody has done long back, no symptoms, nothing. I asked the patient to restore this tooth and replace this restoration. Even in the IOP, you can see that the tooth looks completely fine, but I saw this distal marginal crack and I was like, we need to do something about this tooth. As I removed it, you can see that there is a proper fractured line, there's a proper cracked tooth, and this is a vertical crack. So there are multiple other cracks as well. You can see this crack here, this crack here, crack, crack, crack. But these are all oblique cracks. But this big crack, this is a vertical crack, okay? And I'm not sure if you can see these two pulp horns. So my mesial and distobuccal pulp horns are also very, very close. I'm very close to the pulp chamber as well. But before starting this case, I had done a pulp sensitivity test, and what I found was that this tooth was completely vital. Okay, that is, I went to restore it. So I placed biodentine only on these two areas, dissected the crack completely in the peripheral seal zone, removed this crack as well, and then I waited for 10 minutes for the biodentine to set completely. Okay, after which I proceeded to bond, build this layer, build the proximal wall, and then I did a composite build-up. And then this patient was under review for 3 months, after which, if the pulp status is completely intact, they will go for a complete coverage for this tooth in the sense of an overlay or something, because we cannot leave all the cusps just like that, because they were very thin cusps. But I was very concerned about the pulp status of how the tooth was going to react. If you look at it, we are right on the pulpal horns. So I just wanted to keep this tooth under review. It's not been more than 2 months now, I guess, for this case. So after 3 months, we're going to review this case, and then they'll go for a full coverage restoration, sort of an overlay or something. Another case, very interesting case. This patient was a habitual betel nut chewer, and he had cracked almost all his teeth. Saw this mesiodistal crack when I removed this restoration, and I referred the patient for a CT scan. The patient had pain with this tooth, and I wanted to evaluate whether we can save this tooth or not. So it's very important for us to understand the role that a CT scan plays. Okay, sometimes we will be able to see if a crack is going all the way down and it is splitting the tooth or not, because I don't want to be able to do endodontic therapy and then have the patient lose a tooth. Okay, in any case, we have to be able to inform the patient that such and such situation has happened with your tooth, and now it is your call what you want to do with it. Okay, so if you look at it, the CT report came back. They said that a very thin hypodense line extends from the occlusal aspect of 1/6 to the pulp chamber and further extends towards the furcation area. And they've written it is suggestive of a possible hairline fracture. The patient came back, I explained it to them. I told them, even if we do try root canal, it's no use because it has sort of progressed all the way to the furcation. So I'm not sure what we can do much. If you want to do root canal, we can, it will solve your symptoms for a while, but the tooth is mechanically broken. Okay. But the patient wanted to save the tooth. They were like, no, we'll just do the root canal. We'll evaluate the symptoms. I'll stop eating from this side, all that stuff. So we did root canal based on the patient's wishes, took a consent form that the patient was explained about this, because we know we have to explain to the patient in the future, if this tooth breaks or it fractures completely, the patient should not come and blame you that you didn't tell me that this was going to happen. So the patient was completely informed about this. We proceeded to do root canal therapy, and this tooth was completely necrotic. There was nothing in this tooth. It was completely dead. Did the root canal, and this patient turned up to me after a year saying that the tooth has cracked, as you said, and we knew this was going to happen. I suggested to do another CT scan because I wanted to see how the fracture now looked on a CT scan. And as you can see, it is the same fracture, slightly different. It is going on to the palatal root, and it has gone to split the tooth. The patient still has the tooth, but it has cracked majorly. In fact, if you can see, it has cracked my indirect as well. So what is going to happen is going to happen. Even if you try to do root canal, it's probably just going to manage the symptoms, but you're not going to prevent the inevitable, that it is going to split the tooth in the future. So this is what I want to show, that it's very important that you talk to the patient, you know exactly what's going to happen, because if you're not able to diagnose properly, your treatment is going to be wrong. And even in the future, when the patient comes back, it's going to be on your head that you did not inform them prior. So this patient had a split tooth and he was still normal because he was informed in prior about what was going to happen. So he was very comfortable with the treatment option of extraction at this point, because he knew, okay, doctor साहब ने पहले ही बोला था that this was going to happen. So he is comfortable with it now. He had the tooth for a year, probably he's happy with that, but up to the patient. So you explained everything to the patient. This is going to happen. what do you want us to do, and then you can take a call accordingly. In my opinion, when I open a chamber and I see that the crack has progressed all the way up till the chamber, or it has gone all the way till the root orifices, the root canal orifices, I'm going to extract the tooth no matter what the patient says. In this patient, I did not see that. So I was like, okay, let's see how the tooth fares, but it fractured any which way. Okay. So it's a sort of a gamble. I guess we learn more with experiences of, but cracked teeth are still a challenge for the practitioners. Okay. Coming to prevention, there are certain things that we can do from our end to prevent such cracked teeth. Is that it actually prevention plays a really important role by halting the occurrence and the development of cracked teeth, which is caused by multitude of factors which we've already discussed. So if the patient maintains good oral hygiene, adopts good cleaning practices, develops healthy chewing habits, follows a proper diet, avoid clenching, grinding, abrasion, bruxism, eating all the betel nut, all the hard food. So also, if they increase the frequency of coming to the dental office, getting oral examination done, so you will be on the lookout for cracked teeth more. You know how important it is to save a tooth, catch it, early, all that stuff. So if you do all these things, we can prevent a cracked tooth, or at least avoid the possibility of completely losing the affected tooth, or at least push it for as long as we can, because after all, we are in the business of saving teeth. So preventing and being on the lookout for cracked teeth would be a major game changer, I guess. Okay. So to conclude, did you guys crack the code, or there's so much to learn still? Treating cracked teeth still remains very challenging in daily practice, and therefore a careful diagnosis associated with a clear understanding of the biomechanical behavior of natural teeth is still the best basis from which to draw guidelines for cracked tooth restoration. So I've given you a very, very basic guideline, okay, made you understand the pathognomic feature of a crack, how it happens, and the consequences of a crack, how the enamel and the dentine and the DJ itself are resistant to crack, all those factors. I have given a very basic overview. Okay. Nevertheless, rebuilding and reinforcing the remaining structure of a cracked tooth is often uh, leading to certain clinical frustrations, because as we all know, mineralized dental tissue cannot heal by itself, and to date it cannot be remineralized or repaired ad integrum. Okay. So the changing range and direction of occlusal load is actually the best treatment option. As I told, those steep cusps that you have, the steep inclinations that you have, could be the best treatment options to prevent the extension of cracks, which could actually possibly lead to the loss of the tooth. So in such cases, adhesive dentistry is which is what comes to our rescue, and it does not necessarily have to be minimally invasive, but at least it provides an opportunity to preserve as much sound cervical tooth structure as we can possibly, and avoid further tooth preparation and further tooth loss, like, where everybody previously were like, in cracked tooth we're going to give full clinical crowns, full crown, this and that. So no, because of the adhesive dentistry, we still have options to preserve as much as we can of the original tooth as possible, especially the biorim. That is the main thing that we need to save. So ongoing investigations in the field of biomaterials, as well as future research into the biological repair of the tooth processes as well, it will proceed, it will continue. So without doubt, it will increase the therapeutic range that we have, that will be available to us to treat and repair cracked teeth. Okay. So I guess the future looks bright. That would be the end of my presentation. If you guys have any questions, I am always up for questions, and you can also reach me out on the social media sites in case you want any questions. And in case you people want to learn more about cracked teeth, or if you want me to do another seminar on vertical root fractures or other categories or the other classifications that I spoke about. Today we spoke only on cracked teeth, but vertical root fractures is a whole different ball game. So in case you guys would want to see more of that, you can put it in the comments, or you can, reach out to me and let me know what you would like to see more of. But otherwise, I am open to questions now.
Okay, okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. So we'll do a little bit of a question answer session right now. So I would request the audience to please post your questions which is relevant to the topic.
Okay.
So there's one question regarding about the difference between a vertical and an oblique cracks.
Okay. I'll try to show you a picture. 1 second. Uh, can you look at this slide? Can everybody see the screen? So, to put it simply, if you can see the fracture very clearly, if you can see the crack very clearly, that would be a vertical. This is a vertical crack. Okay. The cracks that you can't see, that I mean, they are not as obvious as this one. There was one crack that was going here. There's one crack here. There's one crack here. This gets more obvious with magnification when you're looking inside. Those are oblique cracks. Oblique cracks can be removed. Vertical cracks you don't need to chase completely, but oblique cracks can all be removed because they are not as deep as the vertical cracks. So an obvious crack that you can see, the first crack that you can see, okay, this is very visible, that's a vertical crack. Other cracks are obviously oblique cracks. So I hope that was clear.
So is there any dye to recognize the cracks?
Yeah, there is a dye I spoke about, the methylene blue dye. That is the only dye that you can use. Do not use caries detecting dyes. Do not use Ultradent Sable Seek or the one that comes by Curare. Don't use caries detecting dye for cracks. That is not going to give you the result that you want. Only a methylene blue dye is going to work in this case.
So there's a question regarding about caries crack progression. Will a full coverage crown solve the problem?
So that's the whole point. Earlier, they were telling that a full coverage crown is going to be the solution to cracked teeth because it gives you a bracing effect. It gives you a splinted effect. Okay, basically, what a crack does is separate the tooth fragments, right? So if we splint it back together, if we give a full crown, it's going to solve the issue, right? So that was proposed earlier. Now, because of the advent of adhesive dentistry, we don't have to give a full crown. We can manage with onlays, overlays, and all those things. Manage to a lot, conservatively, I could say. But if you give full crowns, it's not going to be the end of the world. If you do give a full crown, it's also fine. But because we have such facilities available, why would you want to do something like that? You can always go for a partial coverage. However, if you're giving a full coverage also, that is also fine. Not a major issue, I would say. It's still okay. More important is that you first diagnose whether this crack is treatable or not, whether doing an RCT and doing a full coverage count is going to solve the symptoms or not. Okay, because you have to be able to understand the extent and the depth of a crack, whether it has become a longitudinal fracture, whether it is a split tooth, whether it's a vertical root fracture. Not for all cracked teeth you can just manage with RCT and crown alone. So diagnosis is what comes in handy and very important before you start to decide the treatment plan. Any other? Okay, I can see a few questions here. In conclusion, magnification is the only way to properly diagnose a crack. Definitely. If you see it, you know for a fact that it is a crack. But I would also suggest listen to the patient. Half of the answers, half of the diagnosis, you'll be able to get in the history itself. The patient is going to give you everything. Ask more questions. Ask about the type of pain he's going through. They are going to be very vague symptoms for a crack. Okay, so once you have all the history, then you do the clinical examination, do a cold test, do a pulse sensibility test. Once you do that, once you have established the status of the pulp, then you go ahead and decide, okay, how am I going to treat this crack? If it's a pulp in reversible state, I want to save this tooth from a root canal. I'm going to dissect the crack only to a certain extent, do immediate dentinal sealing, put a composite, and then put a ceramic on top of it. Or if it is in an irreversible state, I will do a root canal and I'll still give that bracing effect or splinting effect and then put a full coverage overlay, some sort of thing, that also. So it's not just only magnification. Magnification is a big thing, definitely, but there are other factors as well. Okay. Mm, Ma'am, please explain once the role of enamel tufts in preventing progression of crack. Okay, basically, what I wanted to explain was that enamel tufts are actually going both ways. They are actually paradoxically creating areas where it prevents the propagation of a crack, but also because they are hypomineralized areas in enamel, they are also causing cracks. Okay, so it's a paradoxical thing. I'm not telling that enamel tufts are preventing cracks. I'm telling that they have a dual role. They also prevent cracks to some extent, but they're also hypomineralized, so they also initiate some of the cracks in the enamel. But again, they are not causing, enamel tufts will never cause cracks in a way that are damaging to the tooth itself. Okay, they are causing enamel cracks, craze lines, all that stuff, and it is very, as I said, craze lines are asymptomatic, do not require any treatment as such. The if you want to know the role of enamel in preventing crack, was those three things: the deflection from the internal enamel, external enamel to the internal enamel, the micro cracking that happened, and the bridging that happened in the internal enamel. So all the proteins come and bridge the, crack at the advancing front. So these are the three mechanisms that are played by the enamel in preventing crack propagation. Bruxism and cracked tooth syndrome solution or treatment plan in such cases. Bruxism, you'll have to think about giving a soft splint. Basically, bruxism is something that probably caused the cracked tooth in the first place. So you first treat the cracked tooth, then you treat the bruxism, and then it's going to be the best treatment option. So that way you can do. But first treat the cracked tooth, and then you can give the patient a splint to wear at night so that he does not crack his teeth further. Peripheral seal zone, I already explained, is basically 2 to 3 millimeters of caries free zone, completely caries free zone inside of the DJ. That is your peripheral seal zone. What kind of crown preparation technique to be used in overlay? Okay, this is slightly out of context, but I'll try to explain. Overlay is nothing but where you're going to cover all the cusps, okay? And it's not, and there's no such preparation technique. Basically, you remove the cusps, you get the minimal thickness for the material that you're using, which is going to be obviously lithium silicate, and get that thickness. And it can be any sort of, some people like to do a shoulder. I'm not too much of a fan of shoulder, so I would probably give a butt joint, or I'll give a slightly beveled preparation for an overlay. Otherwise, this is a pretty big topic to discuss. You can look at Dr. Arshia. You can look at this article by Federico Ferraris. He's written a beautiful article describing exactly how to make overlays and what kind of preparation techniques you need to follow. Or you can just message me on social media. I'll send you the article. What can be done for RC treated premolar upper where the palatal cusp is fractured off? You can replace the cusp. It's RC treated any which way. Do a core buildup and replace the cusp. Either if you want to do it in a partial way, you can do that. Depends on how much tooth structure is gone. Or if you want to do a full crown, you can do that as well. What should be used for immediate dentine sealing? You can use any adhesive agent for immediate dentine sealing, but I would recommend a 4th or a 6th generation bond for IDS because it is better, especially basically a 2 bottle system. You can use, or you can use any other universal bonding agent as well. Can you explain indication of inlay, onlay, overlay, simple procedure in detail? This is such a big topic. Maybe I can cover it later.
Ma'am will try to answer the question which is related to the topic, ma'am. So because if such questions and all, we'll try to explain in another session, obviously.
Okay, so if anybody wants to connect with me on social media, they can. Maybe I can take some of these topics later, but otherwise it's too much to answer. They are going all off topic.
Okay, I guess we will wind up this session, ma'am.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, so if any other queries regarding about the topic, or any other session to be taken by ma'am, definitely we'll have a discussion regarding about it. So please be in touch in our social media platform regarding about it. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise when it comes towards managing the cracked teeth. So surely many of us would leave this discussion with amazing takeaway points and implement techniques as per discussed. So thanks to all the doctors for patient listening and your participation for this episode. And I hope all of you will depart this session with a positive, confident manner. So once again, thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for all the participants who came and after, on a Monday evening after clinical hours, sitting here listening to me. So thank you so much, all of you, for listening. I hope I was able to provide some information and clear a few doubts about cracked teeth. And I hope everyone can save at least one tooth in the future if they listen to this episode of on cracked teeth, and if they're able to take back something, it would be great. So
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much, ma'am. So we really appreciate your valuable time given for us for this series episode.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, guys.
So to know more about our upcoming webinars and workshops, please do check out our website, which is iatpe.org, or you can follow our Instagram and Facebook page as well. So if you have missed any of our previous webinars, please do check out our YouTube channel as well, and we really appreciate if you could subscribe. So thank you all, and have a great night.